If you're hearing this, you've wandered into another quiet corner of the past. Tonight, we drift back to a time of wool cloaks and whispered vows. Medieval relationships weren't always romantic, but they were real. So close your eyes and let's begin where love met duty.
In medieval times, people rarely spoke openly about emotions. There were no words like heartbreak, soulmate, or romantic connection, at least not in the way we use them today. But feelings existed, quietly, in gestures, in habits, in the way a man might stop to fix his wife's shoe without a word, or the way a woman saved her husband's favorite corner of bread. Some wrote prayers, not for health or crops, but for the person they missed. Love was expressed in duty, in presence, and sometimes in silence. Not all medieval marriages were passionate, but many became deep friendships over time. Couples often worked side by side every day for decades. They faced loss, hunger, war, and illness together. A shared life, even without grand affection, could build trust and quiet joy. A farmer might bring wild berries home for his wife. A wife might hum an old song while darning his socks. These small acts, repeated for years, created a bond stronger than any poem. In a time without hospitals or nursing homes, couples cared for one another into old age. A wife might wash her husband's feet when he could no longer walk. A husband might hold a candle for his wife's night prayers when her hands shook. Death was close in the Middle Ages, but so was comfort. A final breath might be taken beside a spouse in a shared bed after decades of quiet togetherness. These moments weren't recorded in books, but they were real. And for many, they were the most important part of a life lived simply and well. Children were often the strongest connection between spouses. In most homes, children were everywhere, swaddled near the fire, chasing chickens in the yard, helping with chores. Mothers and fathers each played essential roles, not divided by modern parenting styles, but by time and survival. When a child was born, it was common to ask neighbors for help. When a child died, which was heartbreakingly not uncommon, couples shared their grief quietly. Through children, couples built lineage, memory, and purpose. Sometimes, a second marriage was softer, gentler, even more affectionate than the first. After experiencing grief, some people chose new spouses not for survival, but for companionship. A widow might marry a neighbor who had always helped with firewood. A widower might ask for the hand of a woman who had nursed his sick child. Second love was different. It came not with excitement, but with understanding, patience, and mutual respect. It was not the love of youth, but the calm warmth of shared experience. Stories from the medieval world are full of longing. Tristan and Isolde, cursed lovers who drank a love potion. Abelard and Eloise, the scholar and the nun who wrote letters for decades. Lancelot and Guinevere, torn between duty and passion. These were tales, but people clung to them. They were told by firelight, repeated by traveling storytellers, and eventually written in parchment. Even in hard times, people wanted to believe in love, dramatic, difficult, beautiful. It gave them hope and dreams beyond the fields and walls. People in the Middle Ages dreamed too. They dreamed of better lives, of gentler partners, of reunion after death. Dreams were sometimes seen as omens or even messages from God. A woman might dream of her husband returning from war. A man might dream of a wife he'd never met, and then spend years looking for her face at market. Even when reality was hard, the imagination remained soft, full of hope, possibility, and the search for someone to share the journey with. Contrary to myth, people in medieval Europe didn't avoid bathing, they simply did it differently. Public bathhouses were common in cities and towns, especially in early medieval periods. Couples sometimes visited them together, sitting in warm water, surrounded by steam and candlelight. Bathing was often seasonal, linked to festivals, weddings, or the arrival of spring. Clean hair, scented herbs rubbed on the skin, and freshly washed linen were all part of courtship and marriage. Cleanliness was considered both physical and spiritual. To wash was not just to prepare the body, but to purify the soul before joining with another. Seasons played a powerful role in love and relationships. In the spring, festivals like May Day celebrated fertility and new beginnings. Young people danced around the maypole, sang, and sometimes slipped away into the woods, away from watchful eyes. In autumn, harvest feasts brought communities together. A shared meal could lead to a shared future. Even Christmas and Easter had matchmaking roles, with gifts exchanged, food shared, and sometimes spontaneous engagements. These moments weren't always romantic, but they made space for connection. A smile during a harvest dance, or two hands brushing while gathering firewood. People believed love could be influenced or protected by the unseen world. In villages across Europe, wise women and herbalists offered charms: lavender to attract affection, rosemary for fidelity, a knot of red thread to bind a lover's thoughts. Some carried small stones for luck in marriage. Others avoided walking under certain trees lest their love be stolen. A person might recite a rhyme under the full moon to dream of their future spouse. Even in a world ruled by the church, people still clung to folk magic, passed down in whispers and firelight. Love looked different in every corner of medieval Europe. In Italy, couples sometimes exchanged silver rings engraved with tiny prayers. In Scotland, hand-fasting, the tying of hands with ribbon, bound two people together for a year and a day before full marriage. In Iceland, poetry was part of courtship, with lovers exchanging verses carved into wood or bone. In Spain, gifts of lace, combs, or handmade shoes were common tokens of affection. Though the church tried to make marriage uniform, people held fast to their local customs, shaping love in the way their grandmothers had. Most medieval people didn't wear white at their weddings. Peasant brides often wore their best dress, usually brown, green, or blue. Blue in particular was sacred, associated with the Virgin Mary, and symbolic of purity and devotion. Wealthy brides wore gowns trimmed with fur, velvet, or gold thread. Not for fashion, but to display their family's status. Flowers were worn in hair, carried in bundles, or sewn into sleeves. Every item had meaning, and the ceremony, no matter how small, was a transformation, from one life to another. As the centuries passed, the church became more involved in relationships. Priests recorded marriages, blessed unions, and gave moral guidance on what love should look like. But the church also struggled to control the deeply human side of love: desire, longing, grief, jealousy. They preached purity, but people still met under stars. They warned against passion, but poems were still written. In the end, faith didn't erase emotion, it shaped it. Many couples prayed together, confessed together, and believed that their love, however simple, was seen by God. Even in poor households, people found ways to give love through objects. A woven belt dyed with plants from the garden, a wooden whistle carved from a fallen branch, a locket with a saint's image passed through many hands. These were not expensive, but they were precious because they were made by hand and offered with hope. A small spoon, a woolen cap, a single apple polished until it shone. In a world of little, giving something was everything. In medieval society, your class defined your life. Peasants married peasants, nobles married nobles, and falling in love across those boundaries was rare, dangerous, and often forbidden. A young maidservant falling for the blacksmith's son might draw whispers. A noblewoman caught meeting a stable boy might be locked away. But sometimes, Love slipped past the rules, in quiet letters, brief glances, or evening walks by the river. These relationships rarely lasted. But the memories often did, carried like warm embers through an otherwise ordinary life. Same-sex love existed, even when society refused to name it. Monks wrote poems to other men, nuns kept journals filled with longing for each other, and villagers formed lifelong friendships so close they shared homes, beds, and secrets. The Church condemned such love, but love cannot be erased by silence. Some carved initials into trees, some were buried beside one another in unmarked graves. Most were never recorded in books, but they lived in soft smiles, shared candles, and whispered prayers. Many people entered religious life not by choice, but by family decision. A second son sent to a monastery, a daughter too poor to marry, placed in a convent. Yet even within stone walls, human hearts beat. Monks lived together in silence, prayer, and labor, and sometimes in affection. Nuns wrote letters to one another that read more like love poems than scripture. These were not always physical relationships. Often they were deeply emotional, a longing for touch in a world that demanded distance. In castles, monasteries, and cottages, some people wrote letters that were never delivered. A noblewoman might write daily to a husband lost in war, knowing he would never read her words. A peasant might write a prayer, asking to see someone again, even after death. Paper was rare, ink expensive, but still, people wrote. They hid these letters in chests, behind hearthstones, or in pages of books. Messages written not to be sent, but simply to be said. Not every couple waited for approval. Some eloped, running away under cover of night. A girl might flee a strict father. A boy might abandon an arranged match. In some cases, couples married each other by word alone, saying vows in private, in the woods or fields, binding themselves with nothing but honesty and hope. The Church called these clandestine marriages and disapproved. But to many, they were more sacred than any ritual.
Some ended in hardship, others in lifelong companionship. All were born of courage and quiet desperation. Not all women wanted husbands. Some chose to remain unmarried and faced the judgment of society. They were called spinsters, witches, or unnatural. But many were simply independent. They ran inns, brewed ale, healed the sick, raised nieces and nephews as their own. Some formed tight bonds with other unmarried women, supporting one another through life. Their love wasn't romantic, but it was real. A chosen family, born not of blood, but of shared strength. And now, as the stars glimmer over that faraway world, and the moonlight softens the stone paths beneath its silver glow, you've seen the parts of love that history tried to hide. The forbidden, the unspoken, the unnamed. These hearts that beat quietly beneath linen and wool, that longed without words, that loved in glances, in chores, in rituals. They belong to people who never imagined they'd be remembered. And yet, here you are, listening, imagining their footsteps across stone, their shadows by candlelight, their whispered prayers folded into dusk. History remembers kings and wars, but the real story, the deeper truth, was always in the ordinary, in the way someone set out 2 cups instead of 1, in the lullabies sung under thatched roofs, in a hand held tightly during childbirth, or a final breath. Centuries pass, languages change, but love endures. Not loud, not grand, but enduring. Soft as wool, steady as bread. Perhaps as you lie here now, eyes heavy, heart quiet, you carry echoes of those old loves, of a woman who left wildflowers at the doorstep, of a man who waited each spring for a voice in the crowd. You don't need to remember their names, just the feeling, the warmth in small things, the truth in silence. And as sleep begins to fold around you, like a cloak drawn against night wind, know this: somewhere in time, two people held each other, not for glory, not for story, but simply because they had chosen to. And that was enough.
For many in the medieval world, the deepest love was divine. Monks and nuns gave their lives to God, in silence, in prayer, in service. They believed that love for the divine was greater than all else. And yet, even here, there was tenderness. The way a brother tended a sick sister in the abbey, the way a nun whispered prayers for a lost soul. There was compassion, peace, and a love that did not need to be returned, to be real. In a world where many could not read or write, actions became the language of love. A husband rising early to fetch water before his wife awoke. A mother weaving warmth into her child's winter coat. A soldier carrying a flower pressed between pages of a book. No declarations, no poetry, just presence, just care. The gestures said it all. The centuries have passed, stone castles have crumbled, the people are long gone, but love remains. In stories, in letters unearthed from wooden chests, in rings found beneath old oak trees, in faded paintings on chapel walls, the quiet truth lives on, reminding us that love doesn't need to shout. It only needs to stay. So now, as you lie still, eyes growing heavy, know that love in the Middle Ages was not perfect, but it was present, in hardship, in war, in poverty, in faith, in silence. It waited, it worked, it whispered, and it endured. Just like yours will. So sleep now, with the soft comfort of knowing that.
In the darkest centuries. So, I hope you enjoy the Slay history, and make sure you subscribe of the channel and hit the like button. See you in the next video. Till then, good night. Love was the quiet light that never went out.